In addition to the therapist we had originally consulted, there was now a second psychologist for Dylan, whom Woody had employed at the urging of the first, to address Dylan's fearfulness and inability to communicate with him, and of course presumably there was his own psychiatrist. I felt the matter was in responsible hands, and indeed I had observed positive changes. I wanted to trust that all would be well. Still, on that day of December 17th, 1991, I was concerned enough that before I would agree to accompany Woody to court for Dylan's and Moses's adoption, I made him promise that he would never try to take Dylan for overnight visits without me, and that if, God forbid, our relationship should ever falter, that he would never seek custody. This he promised me. He gave me his word. We were sitting in the camper, and he put his arm around me and said, "I would not even want the kids to live with me. I don't want kids around all the time, you know that. Come on now, what kind of thoughts are you having?" I expected to spend the rest of my life with Woody Allen, and was willing to do whatever was necessary for our relationship to continue in a good way. I had never refused him anything. Now I feared that if I denied him the adoptions, it would end our relationship. He had already suggested that I might find it difficult in the real world to work and support the children. How many times have I wished that I could go back to that day in the chambers of Judge Roth. Dylan, whom I held in my lap, was whispering in my ear, "I want to go home." Moses sat across the table, radiant, next to his soon-to-be dad. The judge was radiant too, when suddenly she blurted to Moses, "Do you know who I am?" "No," Moses said. "You don't know who I am?" she went on. "No," Moses repeated uncomfortably. The judge looked slightly crestfallen. Then she jumped up, ran over to the closet, and whisked out her long black robe, holding it up to her chin. She sashayed toward him and again asked, "Now do you know?" In a tiny, miserable voice, Moses said no. He was mystified. He thought she wanted him to say her actual name. Now he wanted the floor to open up and swallow him. It was a relief when finally the judge returned her robe to the closet and turned her attention to Woody. Once I interrupted to say, "I'm not giving anything up, am I?" which must have seemed such a non sequitur that she looked at me for the first and only time that day. "No, of course not," she answered. Then I signed the papers. Afterward we returned to the set of Husbands and Wives, and the kids went back to their schools, and things went on the same as always, except that Moses was walking on air. Two days later, on December 19th, we celebrated Satchel's 4th birthday, and then it was Christmas. Because we were scheduled to work right through the holidays, I had to be in the city, but the kids and I went to Frog Hollow for the weekend. Suni, however, asked to stay in New York to shop. When she arrived at Frog Hollow just days before Christmas without having bought any presents, I took her shopping. "Do you think Woody would like this?" she asked, examining a small, delicately engraved antique letter opener. "Sure he would," I said. "It's beautiful." On Christmas morning, in the city, after opening the presents, the 9 kids and I filled a pew at Mass and then returned to a veritable feast. Our table was decorated with a tiny Christmas tree and holly and a Swedish centerpiece with candles and carved angels, and there were 2 turkeys. Many kids want a leg. Mavis had made her special stuffing, and there were mashed potatoes, gravy, orange squash, cranberry sauce, and bowls of fresh fruit punch and eggnog. We were in the middle of our meal when Woody walked in. He disliked Christmas and did not celebrate it himself, except for one year when he put up a bare tree for us in his apartment with a black bat at the top. Nonetheless, he showed up just like every other day. He presented the older kids each with an envelope containing a check for $50. There was an extra chair, but he chose to stand, behind Dylan. I told him how beautiful the carols had been and what a fine voice Matthew has, and he said, "Pardon me while I puke." Then he went over and turned on the juicer, which to my knowledge he had never noticed before. It was deafening, so we all stopped talking and waited for him to finish. He shouted out, "Anybody want juice?" We shook our heads because it was the middle of Christmas dinner, and besides, as anyone could see, we had these 2 enormous bowls of eggnog and punch right on the table. But he went on, "Somebody get me some apples." Lark jumped up and got apples out of the refrigerator. "Would you cut them up?" he shouted over the noise. Lark cut them up and returned to her seat. We all sat and waited. It was useless to talk. Finally, he turned off the machine and held up a large glass of apple juice. "Nobody wants this?" he asked us. Again we shook our heads, and he poured the juice into the sink. Then he took Dylan out of her chair and went to another room. We continued filming husbands and wives, waiting eagerly for Tam's delayed arrival in New York. All the kids were home from school. I brought the youngest ones to work with me, and I tried to spend time with the older ones. On New Year's Eve, Woody and I got dressed up to have dinner at an expensive restaurant. Another night we took Fletcher, Moses, Daisy, and Dylan to the Russian tea room. We took Suni out to Sparks, a steakhouse we'd told her about. On the evening of January 12th, the whole family had Chinese takeout in the kitchen, the same as every Sunday. While I cleaned the kitchen, Woody drifted into the living room with Dylan. When I joined them, Fletcher and Suni were there too. Woody brought up the idea of us all moving to Paris. That was always fun to talk about. As usual, we got carried away. Woody told Fletcher about the French film industry because Fletcher was showing an interest in making films, and now that Suni was switching her major from psychology to art, I said it would be great for her to spend time in Paris. I wasn't working the next day, so I accompanied one of the children to a therapy session at Woody's apartment. I let us in with the key Woody kept under the umbrella stand and sat down with Isaiah Berlin's The Crooked Timber of Humanity in the corner room where I usually waited. Knowing I'd be there, Woody phoned from work. We chatted lightly as we always did several times during the day. Then I hung up the phone, and as I turned toward the center of the room, on the mantel, there was a stack of pornographic Polaroid pictures, a naked woman with her legs spread wide apart. It took me a moment to realize it was Suni. I couldn't stop shaking. I called his office and said it was an emergency. Minutes later, he called me back. "I found the pictures," I said. "Get away from us." I hung up the phone. I put the pictures in my bag. I put a coat on the child, and we went home. I passed Mavis and the babysitter in the kitchen. Sasha was in the hallway. I said, "Woody's been fucking Suni. Call Andre." I went into Suni's room and showed her the pictures. "What have you done?" I shouted. I went into my bedroom and closed the door and tried to call Andre with no success. It was hard to breathe. I wanted to take a bath. Suddenly Woody was opening my door. Sobbing, I tried with all my strength to push him out. "I'm in love with Suni," he said. "I would marry her." It took me a moment to respond. "Then take her," I finally said, "and get out." "No, no," he recanted immediately. "That's just something I thought of to say in the car coming over here. It's not what I feel. I don't want that." "Get out," I said, crying hard. "What am I supposed to tell the kids? That their father wants to marry their sister?" But he wouldn't leave. I washed my face. I wanted a bath. For the next 4 hours he was in my room talking. "What have you done to her?" I said. "I think it was good for Suni. I think it gave her a little confidence." "Confidence in what?" I exploded. "You made her betray everything she had and everyone, and you say it's good for her?" "I love you," he kept saying. "Let's use this as a springboard into a deeper relationship." "What about Suni and me? What happens to our relationship? What happens to our whole family?" "We have to try to put all of it behind us," he said soothingly. "How do we do that? She's my daughter. She's the sister of your children." "I'm sorry," he said. "I lost control. It will never happen again. I can only say I'm sorry." "How long?" I asked. "How long has this been going on?" "I don't know," he said. "Several months." "How long is several?" "I don't know," he repeated. "Look, it was just a tepid little affair that probably wouldn't have lasted more than a few weeks longer anyway. I told Suni she shouldn't expect anything. I encouraged her to go ahead and sleep with other guys." "Go away." "Let's turn this thing around right now. It was nothing, just an aberration." I was crying the whole time. "I trusted you. We all trusted you. You're supposed to do the right thing. You're not supposed to fuck the kids." Just then Sasha knocked at the door. "I've got Andre on the phone," he called. "No, no," Woody pleaded desperately, doubling over. "Don't tell Andre. Don't tell Andre. Don't tell him." I picked up the phone and told Andre, "Woody's been fucking Suni." "Oh, this is so humiliating." Woody was on the floor, groaning. "Oh, my stomach. Oh, oh." "What's that?" Andre asked. "That's Woody rolling on the floor," I said. "Get him out of there right now," ordered Andre from California. "I'm trying, but he won't go. What do I do? What do I do with Suni? Will you take her till the holidays are over, till she can go back to school? She's your daughter, too. I need help, Andre." But Andre didn't know what to do. He was shocked and furious, horrified and disgusted. He wouldn't talk to Suni, and he sure as hell didn't want her at his house in New York. However I begged him, Woody wouldn't go. He talked in circles. He talked non-stop. He said everything I had ever wanted to hear during our dozen years. "It's conceivable that somewhere down the line we might even get married," he said to me. But I just kept saying, "I don't know, I don't know." "I feel terrible," he said, "but we have to move on from here. I love you. I'm asking you to trust me. You can trust me. I will prove it to you over time. As horrible as this has been, it has shown me something, and right now you couldn't find a more trustworthy man on this planet." "I don't know," I kept saying. "I have to take a bath." When I went into my bathroom, I discovered little Satchel crouching under the sink. He must have heard everything. I took him out to the babysitter. Woody went in to talk to Suni, to tell her, he said, that he was wrong to have started a relationship with her and that it would not continue. My bath was drawn when he came back into my room. "Please go away now," I said. "I'm going to take a bath. Please just go." But he talked and wouldn't stop talking until I gave up. I lay down on my bed, exhausted. All those hours in that room, it was an existence unto itself. There were times when I expressed my rage and disbelief and horror, and there were times when he became again the man I loved and wanted and needed with all my being. At one point he kissed me, and I, still crying hard, kissed him back. "Trust me," he said. "I love you." He was rocking me as if I were a little baby. "I know I did a bad thing," he said. "Shh, I can only promise you nothing like this will ever happen again. I will devote myself to making you happy. You'll see." Finally, I got him to go by leaving the room myself. He followed me, still talking, to the front door and out into the hallway, and he was talking when I pushed the button for the elevator, and while we waited, and even as the elevator doors closed. I had a bath. I telephoned Matthew at Yale and told him there'd been a catastrophe. Less than an hour later, the kids were sitting at the dinner table. Sasha had told the older ones what had happened, but not Dylan, of course. Satchel knew what he knew. It was a stunned, silent meal. Woody walked right in and sat down next to Dylan at the table as if nothing had happened. He said hi to everybody and started chatting to the two little ones. One by one, Lark, Daisy, Fletcher, Sasha, and Moses took their plates and went to their rooms, closing their doors. I didn't know what to do. I went out, following them a little. Then, standing in the hallway, I said to Woody, "You can't just come in here and sit down at the table as if nothing happened. People have feelings, and very strong feelings." He told me to come into the living room, and there followed another hour of him talking and me crying. I don't even remember what he said, and the whole time I was begging him to leave. Finally he went. Nights were the worst. "Please come over and talk to Suni," I asked Casey the following day. "Make sure she knows I still love her. She needs to know that, but I'm too angry to do it." For the first time in my life, I sought professional help. I saw to it that those of my children who needed it, including Suni, also received counseling to deal with the trauma. Woody encouraged this and paid for it. All the while, I tried to see to it that life continued as normally as possible for all of us. I got the children up at 7 and fed them, teeth were brushed, they were dressed and taken to school at 8 when the babysitter arrived. The two youngest children saw and heard Suni crying, and although I tried, it was not possible to entirely conceal my own distress. It took 2 weeks for me to reach a point where I could send the babysitter to Woody's screening room to take away his key. Until then, he kept on coming to our apartment, and he went on talking. Each time he came over, and every time he called me on the phone, I came undone all over again. We went to Frog Hollow that weekend, all the children, including Suni. In the lobby of our building, I hugged her and told her I loved her. "You're incredible, Mom," she said.